Hey, Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I don't know if you've heard, but Mint's premium wireless is $15 a month. But I'd like to offer one other perk. We have no stores. That means no small talk. Crazy weather we're having. No, it's not. It's just weather. It is an introvert's dream. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan. $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Scary. I'm your host Will, and each episode I narrate your real paranormal encounters. And if you have one, you can send it to scaryaparanormalpodcast at gmail.com and it just might get read out on the show. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to say a special shout out to our new Patreon subscribers, who are Ida Vasilete, Hannah McIntosh and Jess Birch. Thank you so much for signing up to the show's Patreon. If this is something that you're interested in, you can find a link to the show's Patreon in this episode's show notes, or simply go to patreon.com/scaryaparanormalpodcast, where you'll get access to ad-free main episodes as well as exclusive Patreon-only scary episodes. And a special thank you to Kyle for sending in his paranormal encounter that he experienced in our latest exclusive Patreon episode entitled Someone's at Home. But now, let's get into this week's encounter. My paranormal encounter happened in 2022. 2 years prior to that, my wife and I purchased our first home. Both of us had grown up in Birmingham, and wanting to stay in the area because both our families were there, we ended up finding a house, a semi-detached 2-story. We were lucky enough to find a house that didn't need too much work to be done inside. It had a big enough garden for our 2 kids, and the street was pretty safe. As expected, the house next door was a complete mirror image of our own house, structurally. Where our hallway was, on the other side of the wall was our neighbour's hallway, and so on. So it wasn't long before we realised that the person who was living next door must have been deaf. Our living rooms, again, were mirroring each other, and you could hear the noise of the television blaring in the evening time. And sometimes late into the night where you just knew that they were after falling asleep in a chair or something. Who lived in that house at first was a bit of a mystery. The blinds were almost always fully pulled down, but the ground outside was immaculate. It was like somebody was looking after it in the dead of night. It wasn't until a couple of weeks of living there that I eventually met the neighbour. Martin was a man in his late 70s, and I soon found out that 20 years prior, his wife had passed away from a stroke. They had no kids, and he was the type of man that had very few words, but you could tell that he was a kind and good person. He'd sometimes drop a present in to one of the kids, but never want to come inside. He'd do a bit of a hit and run, knock on the door, give the present, and then say he had to go. But he was just going back inside to watch TV. And I get it, some people are introverts. But me and my wife would have discussions about whether we thought he was lonely. Or maybe he just enjoyed his own company. And after a barrage of ads on the television over Christmas saying to call into elderly people and make sure that they're okay, I kind of decided to knock on the door one Friday night with some beers and see how he would react. Luckily, he seemed pleasantly surprised, and for the first time I ended up going inside Martin's house. And once inside, I realised that he classed that as his safe space. He was way more relaxed in his home than he was even when he'd come to our front door. Like I said, he was a man of few words. But when he did talk, he'd say things that you'd want to hear. Interesting things. He'd tell me things about his youth that, to be honest, didn't really seem to fit in with what I thought his personality was now. It was like he was talking about somebody else. We were able to sit in silence comfortably. We'd end up watching some sports on the television, but I could tell that he enjoyed the company. So this became a bit of a routine. Most Fridays I'd call in, we'd have some chats. The odd time we'd order a takeaway. I'd ask him if he wanted to come over to our house, but I could tell immediately by his reaction that he would find that very uncomfortable. So I told him, hey, it's fine. I'm happy to come here. It's literally a couple of feet away from my front door. As time went on, he opened up more. The kids would speak to him through the fence in the garden. He still wasn't coming over to the house, but we'd share a coffee sometimes in the daytime outside. In May 2023, I had told him how the family and I were going on a holiday, and that would he look after the house, make sure that there wasn't any strange things happening. And when we arrived back, Martin had passed away. His funeral was very sad. He had one brother that he hadn't ever really talked about, and a couple of other people that just kind of knew him. He had suffered a heart attack while he was outside his house cleaning up the front driveway. And in a weird way, my wife and I were happy that it had happened outside his house and somebody had found him. Otherwise, he would have been left there for days. We have 2 kids, Lucy and Jack. Lucy's 5 and Jack is 7. Their interactions with Martin were at the front door and in the backyard through the fence. There was one part of the fence that was broken that we never fixed because it ended up being a way for the kids to talk to Martin and him to see them. Sounds weird, but it just kind of worked for us. When Martin passed, we explained to the kids that he had gone to heaven and how he wouldn't be around anymore. And they were quite upset, really. I think in a weird way they viewed him as being a bit of a grandfather figure. 2 months later, in July 2023, the kids were playing out the back when Lucy came into the kitchen with a very angry look on her face. Naturally, we asked her what was wrong, and she said, "You lied to me. You said Martin had gone to heaven, but he's not gone to heaven. I just spoke to him out the back. He was asking me, was I having some fun?" My wife and I were naturally a bit alarmed because we thought there could be some man out the back that we weren't sure of. We knew Martin had passed away, so we went out, looked all around, but couldn't see anything or anyone. We both just gently questioned her about where she spoke to this man, what he looked like, And when we questioned her, she had this frown on her face, saying, "It's Martin, I told you." She seemed adamant that this man was Martin. And even stranger, she said that she spoke to him at the exact spot that she would normally speak to Martin. Then we thought maybe somebody might have gotten in next door. Martin's brother had left me a spare key in case anything had gone wrong. So we went inside and there was nobody there. Completely empty. No signs of broken windows or forced entry. Everything seemed completely normal. We asked our son if he had seen anything. He said he didn't. He said he saw Lucy speaking at the gap in the fence but didn't see anything, so we put it down to imagination. The next weird thing to happen was a couple of weeks after that. We have a Ring doorbell camera, and one evening the doorbell rang, and when we looked on the camera there was nobody there. This happened a few times, and eventually I got up to see that maybe the camera was frozen and there was actually somebody there. When I went outside, there was nobody there. And what made the whole thing a bit weirder was that it was a Friday evening. And I don't know if that particular event was something paranormal, but it makes me think that it was. Another time, my wife and I were at the back of our house enjoying the good weather. The kids were with their grandparents. And as we were talking, we heard the sound of a lawnmower starting up, which isn't strange. But this particular lawnmower seemed to be coming from the direction of Martin's backyard. And of course, sound travels. So maybe it could be from a few neighbours down. The noise of this lawnmower grew louder and louder. And what made us both really freaked out was when it hit off the fence, coming from inside Martin's backyard. And this is something that used to happen all the time when Martin was alive. When he'd cut the grass, he'd hit his lawnmower off the fence. It was weird because you knew that nobody lived next door, but then we thought, oh, it must be his brother in to cut the grass so the backyard doesn't go like a jungle. And we continued just sitting there and talking. And as I went back inside to get a drink, I decided just to pop my head over the fence to say hello. When I popped my head over the fence, the sound of the lawnmower completely stopped, and there was nobody in the backyard and no lawnmower. I physically had to get a chair for my wife to look over the fence because she didn't believe me. And when she saw the long grass, the two of us were completely freaked out over this. Like I said, this lawnmower was right beside the fence, hitting off the fence. We were so freaked out. We ended up ringing his brother and just playing dumb, asking, "Oh, were you over at the house today?" And he was like, no, I haven't been over. I need to get over though. I need to cut that grass. I'm sure it's really long. It was so odd. That evening, we managed to convince my mum and dad to take the kids overnight, and we had the place to ourselves, which is a very rare occurrence. So we got some drinks, a takeaway, and watched a nice film. Halfway through the film, we started to hear noises. And when we turned the volume down, the sound of a television coming from next door the only other house attached to ours, Martin's, could be heard vibrating through the wall. I think that was the most alarming thing. Because if you're not thinking it's paranormal, then the house is probably being burgled or squatters have gotten in. And we listened against the wall, both of us, for a few minutes. And there you could hear the distinct voices coming from the television, a television where the volume was nearly maxing out. We were both in agreement that there was somebody next door. We knocked on the door just to see if maybe his brother had been over. There was no answer. You could still hear the television on. So we opened the door and both of us went in. The house was completely the way it normally was. All Martin's stuff was still there. I think his brother didn't know what to do with it. And the weirdest thing was, in this house, you could hear the television on in the living room as we got closer and closer to it. Honestly, just expecting to find somebody sitting in there. And just as we got into the sitting room, the television went off. We checked upstairs, checked the back, checked all the doors and windows. Everything was secure. Locked the place up and went back in our own house. For a couple of days after that, we were constantly listening for any noise or sound, any rumbling. We'd be, oh, there's somebody next door, is something happening next door? There was a few things that happened. You'd hear a banging on the wall, kind of solid thumps. My wife said maybe you should go in some Friday night and have a drink with him. She was convinced it was haunted, and to be honest with you, I was pretty much convinced as well. So I asked her to join me, and we went in one Friday evening and had a drink with Martin. Not too long after all this, the house was sold, and currently there is a family that's living next door that seem very, very nice. I don't know if the activity is going on in the house or if anything weird is happening, so we haven't mentioned anything to them. And I like to think that Martin maybe just wanted one last Friday night to have a drink. But I will keep you updated if there's any weird things that happen that the neighbours tell us. Thank you to Dillon for sharing your experience. Names have been changed in this circumstance for obvious reasons. Your experience is heartwarming and also terrifying at the same time. Please do keep us updated if anything else otherworldly happens next door. And once again, thank you for sending in your encounter. That is it for this week's episode. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss a future episode of Scary. You can also catch me on Instagram at scaryaparanormalpodcast, and join me next time for another episode of Scary.
Hi, I'm Casey, host of the Casefile podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about Boost Mobile, offering reliable nationwide coverage backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Love your service or get your money back, no questions asked. With Boost Mobile, you get nationwide coverage and fast network speeds at a fraction of the price. Why pay more for the same great service? Unlimited plans start at just $25 a month, and you won't be sacrificing coverage to save. So why wait? Start saving with Boost today. The Boost Mobile network, together with their roaming partners, covers 99% of the US population. 5G speeds not available in all areas. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find us online at boostmobile.com. Money back guarantee. Try Boost Mobile risk-free for 30 days. If you don't like us, you get your money back. Requires port-in and auto-pay. Customers who cancel within 30 days of activation will have Boost service fees refunded. Activation fees, if applicable, and phone payments will not be refunded.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
You're invited to spend an evening on Fremont Avenue. For generations, this house has been home to soulful music, good food, and cutthroat card games. Saints and sinners. Unexpected laughs and unspoken truths. Good times, hard times, and of course, family. Always family. So pull up a chair and join us at Fremont Avenue, a world premiere play only at Arena Stage. Now in performances. Tickets at arenastage.org.